more important is the actual concrete data of who's buying what. Welcome to the CommStock channel. I'm Joe Camp, here with a follow-up video from my previous commentary on the government shutdown and which reports were being missed or not. We do have the news from Friday about the USDA preparing the crop reports for November. They'll be delayed to the 14th, but they're coming. This was the government's announcement on these reports, starting with a milk production on the 10th, and then that crop production down to the World Ag Outlook Board, who prepares the WASDE balance sheets. That coming again on Friday, November 14th, if the government's shut down or not. We'll see, as an aside, the 21st producing a cattle on feed update. These cattle on feed estimates could be argued missed more sorely than the USDA's guesses on yields. But we'll talk about yields at first, because corn yield likely to, as usual, get first glance on this type of report. Other things have to be caught up, mind you. Still, the numbers, the extra corn bushels found in the September 30 stocks measure have to be fit into the balance sheet. Also interesting to see what USDA does about demand, U.S. exports, China imports. But corn yield, we're going to start having private estimates circulate more fully this week. The conversation began with StoneX this morning. They were at 186 bushels per acre on the corn yield versus USDA, as you can see in the graphic, 186.7 last count, still within a bushel per acre. I think we're going to see others much lower than that. Same for the soybeans at 53.6 bushels per acre for StoneX. That is still a tenth of a bushel above the last recording by USDA at 53.5. What will these yields be built on, these estimates from the USDA? A question, given that the shutdown has skipped over that usual reporting period that involves USDA crop scouts, for one, getting their hands on those actual samples. The next question about farmer surveys and how much those will build into the estimates, given the continued limitations of resources by the USDA. So what's the sampling rate, and how does that factor in to the USDA's projections coming up next Friday? We'll see about the rest of the trade and debate corn yield. As always, I'm going to say about this crop production report something I already commented, and that's almost like, who cares? At least relative to caring a lot more I do about seeing what export sales are being made. Those in the dark right now. The government continues to produce numbers on export inspections, what are actually going out of the country, but how about what's being sold, in part as a direct function of prices and a response thereof, but largely too so important for now, coming into this new month of November with a framework for a deal on Chinese trade. Some of those soybean purchases talked about as confirmed by private sources, commercial traders out there. But what about the government, who would normally produce these daily flash sales if there are any export deals worth more than 100,000 metric tons? If somebody's buying that much, shouldn't we know about it? You have this history of the largest daily export sales for soybeans, all of those China, even up to almost 3 million metric tons in a single shot. We're thinking about, over 100 million bushels that could be purchased at once. Or would it be something that shows up on this list, or simply is it going to be still the possibility of China announcing a goodwill purchase of 2 to even 5 million metric tons? How would they fill that? The questions about doing it by the end of the year and then leading into the next marketing year are still open, but it's something we're absolutely in the dark about, and a serious risk for producers, market participants as a whole, that we would not be receiving these regular updates on what's being sold. Not just soybeans in China, but as we see the corn cumulative sales here, we're going to already be past what is the most active window for corn export purchases. Soybeans, for that matter, as well. Mexico, for example, a huge buyer. Last year at this time, we could see the previous year in blue and that blip up in October. Other buyers could be potentially seeing a better deal than they'd otherwise have if these sales were being reported, the likes of Colombia, South Korea, Japan. A conversation we've got to continue to have, and still a call on the USDA to resume the reporting on these numbers. The exporters out there still have to report on a regular basis, weekly basis to the USDA. And so we've got the data. We need to be reporting on if sales are being made, and we're not currently. That could change, again, given the change of the USDA bringing in some resources to produce the crop report. It can stretch on to a point where we also realize more fully the need to produce these sales so that we don't give the likes of China or Mexico or any other country the cover to be buying without public knowledge. So you have this issue of the export sales numbers missing. The other big report that we don't have, I'd argue, alongside export sales, more important than what the government thinks about even yield or usage. So to pale in comparison to what could be changing in market sentiment would be something shown by trader positions now missing. This leading right up into the third week of September before the government shutdown. You had the soybean position by managed money in blue hovering near a net short of around 50,000 contracts. It's been covered and flipped net long by all accounts, but again, to what degree? And what's the interplay with speculative buying next to commercial selling? That commercial net short, watch closely for what it says about how farmers are moving grain into the system or not based on their feelings about price. So, as always, important for the market and where it heads, the rate of aggressiveness between speculative buying and farmer selling. Another report that's missing, that traders, big traders, can be adjusting their position under the cover of the government shutdown, not showing us this weekly update on the commitment of traders. So, crop report coming on the 14th. We'll see about new numbers on yields. We'll have the government fitting in those extra corn bushels that were found on the September 30th crop report still. We'll have their views on Chinese demand overall for the import totals and also U.S. export targets, if they change or not. And then beyond that, it's going to be pretty quickly back to watching price action and seeing what the market says about these more important, in my view, reports that are missing, namely export sales and the trader position. So if we're going to have any call on the USDA, it's like, oh, thanks, but no thanks for these probably stubbornly high yield estimates, again, in my opinion, for what we'll see on this November catch-up report. More important is the actual concrete data of who's buying what, both in the physical market on export sales and in the futures market for trader positions. So again, this will be my crusade on saying we need those export sales updates back along with the trader positions. You can keep your yield updates, but of course we'll talk about those too as we head into next week. Follow the commentary in the lead up and then in reaction to the government's crop report next week in our CommStock report. Also, we'll follow up here on the CommStock channel. I've been Joe Camp.
Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.